Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. Now today I thought I would do something kind of fun. I'm going to be putting on jagex's shoes to talk about what I would like to see changed in Oldschool Runescape. Now that's not to say that I think they're doing a horrible job or anything. This is just meant to be a fun video, just a medium to showcase what I would like to see changed in the game. Now I'm going to be avoiding some of the more hot topic big picture things. Like I'm not going to talk about, hey, just get rid of all the bots. I mean, obviously I think that's something that both the players and jagex want to do. It's clearly just very challenging. I'm mainly going to focus on more grounded, smaller changes that I think would just augment the game without being just hugely controversial or overreaching changes. As always though, this is just my opinion. If you do feel differently, feel free of course to leave a comment down below and I will probably read it. Anyway guys, let's get started. Now the first thing I want to talk about today is pretty small, but it revolves around transportation. Now one of my favorite aspects about Oldschool Runescape that already exist are the thematic ways that you can transport around the map. For example, stuff like the Waka canoes, the hot air balloon method, the Eagle transportation system, the underground railway. I mean, there's a lot of them, but unfortunately most of them aren't very useful because the magic skill is just so efficient and offers nearly direct teleports to anywhere in the game. The only kind of thematic transportation method that people generally use is the fairy ring system. Now RuneScape actually has surprising depth when it comes to unlocking transportation methods. Some of them require high magic levels, some of them require diaries to unlock, and there are of course shortcuts that require agility. My suggestion would be though that we should focus on incorporating other skills, for example, Firemaking. Firemaking has very minimal uses, and actually we're going to talk about that next. For example, I think expanding the hot air balloon system would be great. I mean, there's not really many limitations there. I mean, it's just a hot air balloon, it can kind of float anywhere. But why not add in hot air balloon routes that require levels 60, 70, 80, and maybe even 90? I think for new and maybe some existing transport methods that are normally done just by magic teleportation, I think instead of doing that, maybe incorporating some of the existing or maybe just adding in new thematic ways to get around the map would be a lot more fun and engaging. Like for example, the Eagle transportation system, you normally just use maybe once for the diary. The underground railway, you use like once for the diary. Now just to give a few specific examples, for one here we have this very interesting Zaya minecart network. However, the problem is that nobody really uses it because it takes too long to get to. It's not really that useful as a transport method, but it fits really well into Zaya. It's thematic. I really like the idea of it. Now one potential fix is keep it the way it is, but maybe add in an additional access point in Keldegrim. So for example, you could take a shortcut from the GE to Keldegrim, and then from Keldegrim you could take it to Zaya. And if you wanted to balance it further, you could add in further requirements. Now another idea is to add in more transportation methods on some of the other rivers in Gielinor. I know we have the Waka canoe on the River Lum, but I think adding in additional either just Waka canoes or just other variants of that to the other rivers in Gielinor would be a really good transportation method. For example, on the River Doin, which is located, well, in Ardoin, or even on the rivers in Zaya. Now that kind of leads us into our next topic here, and that is firemaking. Now we already talked about a few ways to make firemaking a bit more useful, but I mean right now firemaking is kind of a joke. The only reason people actually level up your firemaking is either to max an account or just because of some arbitrary requirement for a diary. Other than that, firemaking serves nearly no purpose. Now one really simple change that honestly I think should have just existed from the inception of firemaking is to make it so that higher tier logs burn for longer. It just doesn't really make sense that they all burn for the same amount of time. Now that's not going to fix the fundamental problems with firemaking, but I mean it just makes sense. You require a higher firemaking level to burn these logs, why don't they last longer or provide any other benefit? Like for example, the higher level logs, maybe a redwood log would burn for 5 minutes. It is possible that maybe that's a server related problem, but still it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would really like the idea of expanding the fire pits that were added in last year. If you don't know, the fire pits were added in with the Making Friends with My Arm quest and added in some area of effect, quality of life changes to certain areas. Now I do think this was a good start, but honestly the firemaking level is pretty low for firemaking and it is static across all of the different fire pits. You just require completion of the quest and I guess 66 firemaking. I think adding in some higher level fires that would provide maybe slightly higher benefits or different quality of life changes would be a good direction to go in. And finally, like I said, I think incorporating firemaking into some transportation methods like the hot air balloon system would be another good way to just incentivize people to actually level the skill. Now, another thing I would really like to see in Old School RuneScape, and I think would add in a lot of flavor to the game, is a day-night cycle. I think we can all agree that Old School RuneScape's graphics are pretty dated, but I still think adding in modern features such as a day-night cycle or weather effects would really help make the game a bit more fun to play and just add in a bit more flavor to the game. Now, to tag along with that, I'm a big fan of the distraction and diversion category of content. For example, stuff like clue scrolls, the penguin event from the RS2 era. I mean, actually just today we got a new content update for shooting stars. I think content like this really adds life to the world, just the idea of walking around and perhaps stumbling upon a really interesting piece of content you've never seen before. We could add in small events like wandering merchants that just go around and have interesting items for sale. Maybe a small little combat event that has moderate loot to it. Maybe there's just a dwarf wandering around and he challenges you to a drinking contest and that's it. Just small events that add flavor to the game and would tie into a day-night cycle and just the overarching umbrella of kind of distractions and diversions. Now, next up here, one of the more larger scope changes that I'm going to talk about in this video is reworking the way magic works in combat. Now, the current problem I see with magic combat is magical accuracy is not ever prioritized and is usually not very relevant. We can see that by the pricing of the augury spell. I mean, it's under 500k right now. It is worth 20 times less than the rigor spell, and that is mainly because augury has only a few niche uses, and prioritizing a high magical accuracy as well only has a few uses. For example, if you ever see somebody doing barrows, often they're just wearing a rune plate body because it just doesn't really matter. The Barrows brothers have 0 magical defense, which means augmenting your accuracy doesn't really do that much. So I think making a fundamental change to how this works is one option, or you can add in new monsters or make changes to existing monsters so that they have magical defenses and there's no other way to kill it. I think this would really help revitalize the magic skill as a whole instead of everyone just having to immediately prioritize all of the magic damage percentage gear, which is pretty much what happens now. Now next up here, a few changes to the wilderness. Now the wilderness has been a hot topic just the last couple of days specifically, but just in general. Now there are a plethora of changes you could make to the wilderness, but here are just a few. To begin with here, we need to somehow remove skull tricking as an option, either by adding in another attack option, for example, an option that would only allow you to retaliate against an opponent if it would not skull you. That would be kind of a band-aid solution, or probably the better solution is just to remove all the ways that you can skull trick your opponent, although I think that's going to be nearly impossible. Now, skull tricking is detrimental to the wilderness for a couple of reasons. Not only is it essentially just scamming with some extra steps, it also really disincentivizes people from bringing risk into the wilderness or fighting back. Now, another big change that I know jagex is thinking of doing is reworking the wilderness bosses. Right now, they are incredibly janky. The bosses currently are usually abused by using a very convoluted save spot to get them in a janky position and then you can just kill them. So I definitely think reworking the wilderness bosses to make them a little bit easier to kill with normal methods, I think would be a good change, because right now trying to kill wilderness bosses is just really not a very good experience. Now, the final piece of content I want to talk about today is something on Fossil Island. Now, what I'm talking about are the rare fossils that you can find from a variety of content. Right now, it's kind of left awkwardly open-ended. You can collect rare fossils, and technically you could dismantle them into prayer experience, but that doesn't seem like that was the only intention. The jagex mods intended actually, I believe, to either make a Fossil Island boss from it or some other content. Personally, I think I'm a really big fan of the Fossil Island boss idea. Once you've collected a few of the rare fossils, you can combine them together to unlock one chance at fighting the boss. And I think this would actually make it kind of unique, because unlike any of the other bosses similar to this, like Obor, Skatizo, or Briofita, you could actually collect the key, for lack of a better word, just from doing other activities that aren't combat. For example, you could get them from skilling, woodcutting, hunter, and of course you could get them from combat as well. Now, I would be extremely excited to see a Fossil Island boss added, Not only because I just really like Fossil Island, but mostly because right now rare fossils are just a weird unanswered question, and I think it'd be nice to finally just wrap up Fossil Island, close all the loose ends, and just end it. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Obviously there are hundreds of different things that I would like to see change in the game, but those are some of the things I would like to see the most. Let me know down below what your largest priority changes would be to Old School RuneScape. I'd be curious to read them. Now before I go here, I want to give a massive thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. Just recently, 2 more Dragon tier members have joined. Colin Corley and Red Kamikaze. They're joining Timothy Chen, Cappy, Guy Fox, Valhalla Lad, Brian Robinson, Brad Sings, Ocelot, and Kush Patel, all at the Dragon tier, making it actually the most popular tier. I never thought that would happen. You guys are so generous. Thank you again. Also a massive thank you to Birdbot, Base Titch, All Things Gaming, and of course all of the rest of my YouTube members. As always guys, if you're looking for a way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do so. You can become immortalized in all of my future videos, get access to my video release schedule, and get a custom role in my Discord channel. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you next time.